Good morning, everybody. Kevin Cross, I'm your chair, and welcome to the Municipality of Anchorage Assembly on Public Safety Committee. Madam, today is April 5th, 2023. We are scheduled from 11 to 12:30 today, so please be respectful of time. May we have roll call?
Mr. Constant, Mr. Cross,
Present.
Ms. Stern,
Present.
Ms. LaFrance, Mr. Perez-Verdilla, Mr. Peterson, Ms. Quinn Davidson, Mr. Rivera,
Present.
Mr. Salt, Mr. Sweet,
Present.
Mr. Voland,
Happy to be here.
Ms. Salatel.
Mr. Perez-Verdilla did have a previous appointment, so he was excused, and I know that Ms. LaFrance she's in her office. She'll probably be joining us late, just for the record. So excellent. Okay, let's go ahead and go through. We have our introductions. APD regular updates. Chief Curl. It's a pleasure to see you this morning.
Good morning. I just left here.
You can run, but you can't hide.
Good morning, everybody. So I'll keep it with the agenda. I'll start off with the good news on body cameras, then we'll hit the bad news. So on body cameras, we've completed our assessment of the 3 vendors that have put in for it. We have our committee that is assessing them. The final assessment will be done by next week, and we will send it off to purchasing to start the contracting by the end of next week for the actual body camera itself. So that's good news. Part of the process, we actually put them on uniforms and did reality-based training as part of the evaluation process of the 3 vendors. So that was a good time for the officers to get familiar with them, and for the evaluation committee to actually evaluate it to make sure the cameras that we select will meet our needs. So that's the good news. The bad news, I'm going to pass off to Deputy Chief Case here. He's been intimately involved in the negotiations with the union.
Done as quickly as possible, and we've run some snags, and the arbitration is going to be pushed off until late fall. So our timeline is different than what it previously was. To get this done, I do apologize that we haven't been able to get this done. I figured we'd come to a resolution before we even went to arbitration, but I was hopeful, but that's not happening right now. So late fall is when arbitration is going to be set for now.
I'm sure we have some questions.
You know I'm in the queue, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Rivera.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So a couple things. First is on the reality-based training. I'm wondering if part of that training was also with the IT staff that are going to be handling this as well.
The IT staff is actually the one, they're spearheading everything here. So they're the front man in this whole operation because they're the ones who know what will fit best with the department and that will operate for the city as well.
Great. And then I don't remember if you said this, but did the department already make the selection, or is that going through purchasing to do that?
So the selection committee will make their final selection by next Friday, and then it will go to purchasing, and then purchasing, the contracting, and like we have the money, so it's not a problem. We just need to get through the contracting stuff, and then we can purchase them. We can start training on them in hopes that the policy will eventually get approved and we can put them on the streets.
Thank you. One last question, Mr. Chair. So I had quite the visceral reaction when I heard arbitration is going to be pushed off until late fall. Can you publicly say why? Because it was supposed to happen this month. So why is it being pushed off?
There's an additional issue that came up in negotiations, and both parties agreed that that additional complication with the policy that came up required more preparation time and potentially even a longer arbitration period.
And I just assume by the vagaries of your response that you can't tell us what that policy is publicly.
No, I mean,
Thanks.
I would love to. We have a great relationship with the union, and I don't want to compromise that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I want to note that we were joined by Randy Salt at 11:02 and Mr. Peterson also about that same time. Any other questions regarding body cameras? If I may, also the snags in arbitration, extremely frustrating. My concern has been by the time we iron out all these snags, our equipment will be outdated. It seems to be taking quite some time. The assembly has kind of taken a hands-off role and just hoping this is, and my anticipation is that given this most recent information, they're probably going to take a more proactive role with some sort of resolution or an executive session to figure out why this doesn't seem to be progressing. Because I can't speak for all the other assembly members, but body cameras are typically coming up at our community councils. It's a regular point of conversation, like, where are we at on this? We approved it, we funded it. Is it progressing? Is it not moving forward? And I've been telling my community councils that we've been moving forward and giving them, widely optimistic, or at least mildly optimistic feedback. So now I'm going to have to go back this month and say sorry, and they're going to want answers. And so we'll have more conversations on what that looks like, but we'll have to figure out what you can tell us and what we can tell the public at the same time, respect the confidentiality of your negotiations. But this just seems to be a hamster wheel with no end. So I appreciate that. Anybody else? Thank you. Moving on, MIT position update.
Okay, we had a meeting this morning with Mr. Bullen and Ms. Zalatel, and we really didn't talk about MIT very much. So I'll just let you know, as far as APD goes, we posted for our positions, our clinician positions. We had a fantastic interest from the community. We had 13 people put in for our positions. 11 of them were qualified, and Deputy Chief Case is actually starting the first interviews today to get the clinicians hired on. We look to hire on 4 additional clinicians with the alcohol tax money and 1 additional clinician with the grant that we got that you guys approved a couple weeks ago. So that's moving on really well.
Any questions regarding MIT position updates? Mr. Vaughan, I thought you were working on something.
Yeah, sure. I'll just say that we had a working group this morning, and both APD and AFD were present, and I think it was a really productive conversation about how we can continue to pursue the integrated model of both the mobile intervention team on the APD side and the mobile crisis team on fire side. Still have some wrinkles to iron out as we move forward, but we were able to hear a great update from Officer Ruth Adolph on the work that she's been doing in the community and how those needs are being met. So thank you for attending this morning. And, I think that at least my goal is as these programs continue to do that meaningful work, that we can grow them in the future. So that's a great update. I'm really excited to hear that there was such interest in folks wanting to apply. Thanks.
Excellent. Crime suppression operation.
Okay, so I just wanted to go over I wanted to highlight some of the work. A lot of times you guys get complaints against the police department because we're not there. We don't do things sometimes not quick enough. I just want to let you know that we are constantly doing crime suppression operations, and this is one that we did back in February. This is my crime suppression division. Basically, their main goal is to go out there and arrest the most violent and prolific offenders. And we take them also and put them on, I'll call it the problems that we're community are expressing to us. So we do this operation. It was 3 days. We focused on traffic, warrant arrest, and not shoplifting crimes. I know that's a stigma in the community right now. So this is the overall summary. I'm going to go, I think the big thing to highlight here is we all know there's a fentanyl problem in our community. You can see we seized 8 pounds of fentanyl pills. If you take a little pill and weigh it and realize how many pills 8 pounds are, you'd be astonished. And that was just from this one operation. So we are seeing a lot of fentanyl, but our drug unit is doing a fantastic job of interdicting with the drugs coming into the city. Next slide. So this was our traffic enforcement. We did this for 1 day. This is just to highlight 172 stops, 9 arrests, impounded 6 vehicles. And people say, well, why do you do traffic enforcement? And everybody knows that traffic enforcement is for, we've had a few pedestrian fatalities, but we just need to remind the fantastic citizens of Anchorage that you need to obey traffic laws for the safety of everybody. And this is just in addition to the grants that we get for speed enforcement, seatbelt enforcement, we like to do these as well. Just get out there and let people know that the police are out there and we are enforcing traffic laws as well. Next slide. What this was is the second day we did a warrant roundup. There's a felony and misdemeanor warrants out there. We maintain lists of people who have active warrants, and we make sure that we're actively seeking them. Officers have the ability to look at the warrant list, and when they have downtime, they can actually go out there and do some attempt to make some warrant arrests. But this was an opportunity to get my crime suppression division put together intelligence packets and actually work on it. And we made 22 arrests in that 1 day, 4 of them felony and 18 misdemeanors. Next slide. So this is, I mentioned retail theft, and we all know that's plaguing a lot of the stores here in Anchorage. So we do these retail blitzes. We partner with the loss prevention of stores, and the stores come to us and the businesses come to us and say, hey, can you help us out? We did this one at REI, and we also did it at Fred Meyer on Northern Lights. This was the third day, February 23rd. As you can see, it was a quite prolific day. We had 32 arrests, 39 new charges. 29 of those were shoplifting. Whenever people commit crimes, there's always other incidences which happen. We also just did one last week. We joined up with Walmart to do another retail. We call them retail blitzes. Just that's the police like to come up with cool names for these operations. So retail blitz is what we call these things when we go out and partner. We did do another one last week where we made 20 additional arrests at one of the Walmarts in here. So we do address these issues that come up in the community. I think one of the biggest values we provide is we join with the loss prevention. We give them tips and techniques and what we think they should be doing as stores to help prevent retail theft. I can say I spoke with I had a call from the the regional manager for Walmart. She called me. She's the big boss of their loss prevention. And when I first saw that she wanted to talk to me, I said, we all know that Portland lost their stores because of the theft that was going on. I said, I hope this isn't the same case. And she just wanted to touch base with me. Thank God. She did identify 2 stores and she asked for some recommendations. And we do this with all retail businesses. We give them recommendations how we think they can prevent retail theft. I can tell you, I have 2 foot patrol officers walking right now, and I've told them to go into the Fifth Avenue Mall. I told them to go to North Face and some of the other places, talk to them and give them a police perspective on how they can make changes to curb retail theft. So that's one of the main things we do. We do partner up with these businesses, and we do give them guidance as well to help them come up with ways that they can curb the retail theft. So
Excellent. Mr. Rivera.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I realize that this was a specific operation that probably included specific crimes. Did this include vehicle theft?
no, we were concentrating on three things
Okay.
here. The
Got
three
it.
things were
I appreciate that, Chief. So I think maybe for a future meeting, I think it would be great to hear about vehicle theft because I know, based on my recollection, that's been going up recently, and so would love to just get a better understanding of why that's happening and what APD is doing to counteract that.
okay. I'll
Thanks.
do that next month.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I had Mr. Voland, and then I have Mr. Peterson. Mr. Voland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for this update. So I think you're going to say this was focused on the traffic enforcement, warrant roundup, and retail blitz. It's really interesting to hear your perspective, getting that call from Walmart and thinking, oh no, are they going to close that store? And I think you're very aware of the concern about a store in my district that the cars on Gamble and all the issues they've had with public safety and shoplifting. And I know that a lot of the neighbors are really worried that they're going to potentially lose that grocery store because it's just becoming harder and harder to operate. And the grocery store serves a community that, some of the folks don't have cars. So that's really their only walkable store to shop from. So just wondering, what can we do? I know that the Fairview Community Council has had a workshop and they're sort of asking for more of your presence in that area, whether that's, having some type of station there, substation. And I know it sounds like maybe that is not really the solution potentially, but what can we do to get that store some more support? At our last Public Safety Committee meeting, I think it was our last one or maybe the previous one, you have that graph of sort of where's crime in Anchorage right now, and it's pretty staggering around the Sullivan Arena. A lot of that activity is concentrated. So what can we do to support that community?
I think a lot of the issues when we see retail theft problems, they're national chains or they have policies at a much higher level. And when we make recommendations, we're told corporate policy doesn't allow us to do that. And when that happens, basically they're handcuffed at that point. When corporate policy doesn't allow you to implement things at your store that would actually curb retail theft or other issues there, the store themselves are handcuffed. And unless, the police aren't going to be there, we're not security. That's not what we are. So unless they bolster their own security and change things, we go there, we do a thing called CEPTEB. It's crime prevention through environmental design. We send our CAP team out there to look at the different businesses and say, we recommend changes to the facade or bushes or something there that could actually make it less enticing to people who want to commit crimes. So we do all these things. We make recommendations. Whether businesses choose to follow our recommendations, we can't make them do that. So I will have my CAP team actually reach out to the cars there and go over some things again, and hopefully we can curb some of the incidents that happen there.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. I also want to note that we were joined by Suzanne LaFrance at about 11:10. Mr. Peterson.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. And I actually was looking for some good news in your report today. And I noticed that out of 172 traffic stops, you only had 3 seatbelt violations. And I kind of see that as good news because we've been working for decades to try to get people convinced that they could save their life if you just put on the seatbelt. And so I found that little bit of good news in this report. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Ms. Dern?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chief, I just have a question. In terms of the blitz enforcement, what does an operation like that generally cost?
Well, my officers are on duty. So
It's,
they would be out doing other things as well. Like I said, my crime suppression division, they're doing a lot of these things, but not as in concentrated effort. All I do is concentrate them in there. What it would cost the businesses, I can say the businesses usually bring on more of their security staff because the crimes have to happen in their presence, and we just partner up with them and they point out the people who are trespassing, the people that are shoplifting, and we make sure that laws are being broken. And then we go out there and I'll say we put hands on, and then they fill out the paperwork for the arrests.
so if they have a security staff of their own, and you're not there, what piece might be missing, or what would happen then?
I can say the biggest piece that's missing is some of the corporate policies where security staff cannot go hands-on
Okay.
with the offenders. And when the police are there, well, we're there, so we can go hands-on, and a crime's been committed, we can arrest them. But there's a lot of policies out there across the country which prohibit loss prevention from putting hands on. And the criminals are smart. They know that. They know that they can run the business. They can grab an armful of stuff. They know the business. They can walk out, and the security is just going to let them walk out. And they take a picture of them, and then they call us, and hopefully we can identify them through some means to be able to make an arrest.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. My question is, these numbers are very informative, but I don't have a base to base them off of. So your experience, your guys is on the street. What does that feel like? Are you noticing that it's something that's getting more prolific, or we're noticing a concentration in certain areas? There's the numbers, and then there's what you're experiencing in the role of, keeping our streets safe and protecting businesses. Can you speak a little bit about that? Are you hypothesizing that this is like we're on a downward trend? This is a steady, there's a norm? Kind of tell me what the numbers don't present.
So when we do our crime numbers, generally our property crimes are on decline, our violent crime on a decline. Certainly if you go back 4 or 5 years ago and you look at like our shoplifting numbers, they were substantially higher. When we run these details, this is pretty consistent. In the last couple of years we've run them, we're seeing these steady numbers. So I think generally we're still trending down on some of those crime categories. But when you put a concentrated number of officers in an area, we end up intervening in areas that we haven't. We'll add one thing that the numbers don't tell. We put a public survey out in the field at the end of last year to the community throughout all of Anchorage, and asked a lot of questions about crime and police service. And of the folks that we surveyed, 80% of our people said that they felt safe in the community that they lived in. That is an astonishingly high number. And so I think, the kind of that fear of crime and crime itself, those two together give us a great picture. And it's a positive number for us. We're certainly not done. There's a lot of things that we can do, particularly when we look at the homeless situation and a lot of our businesses downtown that have a lot of significant issues. But there's good news. There's some good news in these numbers.
I think the one thing missing a good follow-up would be is to see what actually happens to the people that we arrest, whether they're sentenced, whether the charges are dismissed, whether, as you can see, violating conditions of release for this one, 5 of them. So at least 5 of the 32 people we arrested were out because they had committed another crime and they were still on conditions of release. But again, we do a fantastic job of arresting people, and it ends there for us. I think that's why we work together with law to make sure it's the court system, law, and the police department. We have our different roles, and I think the follow-up should be, well, what happens after the police arrest them?
Well, just follow up from personal experience owning a business in Midtown, we've had to significantly change the way we conduct business. We used to have 3 entries. We've now had to go to a single point of entry. That way our staff can keep an eye on it. We've had to lock our bathrooms so that people can't go in because they'll go in there and lock themselves in, do drugs, or, maybe be in there for hours. We've also had to increase perimeter search around that and make sure, to keep it clean, keep it nice. We did have to remove some trees. And so, we had to basically, because of what's happening with Sullivan Arena and how that's migrated into Midtown, we've had to, alter our shifts, make sure that we don't have anybody that's there working alone, particularly if it's a young, vulnerable female or whatever that looks like, and be more cognizant of how we staff it. But we've had to make changes. Business is still going well, but it's definitely been a learning process on reimagining what you thought your business operations would look like in order to deal with that. And we've got a handle on it. But once we created an unsavory environment and made those opportunity crimes decrease significantly, it's acquiesced temporarily. So it'll be interesting. But I imagine those are probably part of the conversations that you're having with business owners and stuff on, here's some different things you didn't take into consideration, because a lot of the crimes we discovered were just impulse. There were things where someone saw an opportunity and took an action, and no impulse control. And therefore you have to think, you have to think in advance. So how am I unintentionally creating opportunities to be taken advantage of? So, but excellent. Any other questions for APD before we move on? Gentlemen, I greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Chief Schrage. Come on down. You're the next contestant. Go ahead and introduce yourself, and you've got a copy of the agenda. It looks like we're going to start off with general update and building collapse.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm Doug Schrage, Anchorage Fire Chief, for the record. So thank you. I was asked to report on 4 different topics, and the first one is an update on our response to recent building collapses. Then we'll go into a rash of residential fire fatalities that we've had. I'll give a brief update on the rollout of Pulse Point, and then I was also asked to give a summary of our responses to the Sullivan Arena. So without further ado, I'll go right into the discussion about recent building collapses. We've had 19 known collapses that we've identified, and of those, there was 1 fatality. And the fact that we had a fatality triggered an assessment by the municipality to better understand what was causing these collapses. And we've identified some common factors. Here's a summary of some of the more notable collapses. These are ones that have gathered a bunch of public attention. There was the fatality one in the Turnagain CrossFit on 76th Avenue. That one involved overloaded with a buildup and overlay of snow. We had the Fashion Pact downtown at 6th and Ingra. We had the Northway Mall partial collapse that was discovered by our firefighters investigating a gas leak in the building. And then one at Mitri on Arctic Boulevard. Next slide. What we've identified as the common factors is probably no news to you, is these are all top cord bearing older flat roof truss systems. And these are buildings that have been in place for many years. A lot of them were built in the 80s. They have wood trusses fastened together with gusset plates, which are prone to failure over time as the wood weakens. And also the end of the cord is top cord in this case is resting on the bearing walls. And so the entire weight of the roof is concentrated in a small area, which is what causes these failures. It's exacerbated by the buildup of snow and ice and water. Also, which poor insulation contributes to that and leads to the buildup of all this excess weight. What are we doing about it? We have, our main efforts have been in the area of public information and warning in coordination with OEM and the building engineering. Here's some examples on this slide of part of the information campaigns that have gone out. And following on the same, on the next page, Development Services has been working with the engineering and building communities to help provide assistance in identifying which roofs have these features and potentially subject to failure, and providing some instruction to the owners. And I'll take any questions on the topic of building collapses.
And we can take this up at the CEDC as well. I'm just curious if the building department is going to come out with a list of potential remedies or different, ways that they can resolve that. Just looking forward, since they're identifying the gusset plate failure and the top cord truss where it goes to the bearing wall, like what brackets or what can, if that's in current design, or what we could do to remedy that situation and increase building inspections for resale. I'm just kind of curious if have they given any time frame? Have you heard anything? If their intention is to come out with a solution?
I don't know the answer to that question, Mr. Chair, but I do know that those conversations are occurring. I know there are discussions about the amount of insulation and preventing the buildup of or the melting of snow and ice that's on the roof. There's discussion about inspections, and I don't know, I am joined by our fire marshal. Do you have anything to add to that? Joining me is AFD Fire Marshal Brian Dean.
Good afternoon. The answer to that about follow-up is it's the building department has put out information on the types of failures they're seeing with those top cord trusses, failures of the areas around the gusset plates, and possibly being under-engineered for the snow loading that's occurring. I think having specific solutions is very site dependent, depending on how the failure occurred. So there's a lot of analysis that has to go into each individual failure, because it could be simply a lack of maintenance that occurred, causing some structural rot, or it could be the connection points that the contractor used at the time, or it could be the actual failure or under engineering of the truss. So each incident has its own specific problems that need to be ferreted out before they come up with solutions.
Thank you. I know at the CDC meeting, they said in fact, we talked about insulation and, but in some instances, although it's rare, extra insulation can create other issues, because then what happens is it prevents the heat from escaping, particularly on a pitched roof, which means the snow's not melting and it's beginning to build up the load. And they said on some roof designs, although it's rare, extra insulation can actually increase the amount of load that builds up on the roof and create different problems. So they're looking through the building department on making sure that when someone pulls out, they're adding insulation, that's something they need to be aware of, is taking a look and making sure that in the effort to solve one problem, you're not inadvertently creating another. So, well, thank you very much. Any other questions regarding structural roof collapses? But 19 is an alarming number. I didn't realize it was that high. Thank you. General update on fatality fires.
Okay, yes, thank you. And so it's fortuitous that Chief Dean is sitting here with me on this topic. He did the research on this. This is on our agenda to talk about because from the first of the year, we had 60 fires, and of those 60 fires, we had 5 fire fatalities, which is a high number for our community from these residential fires. 4 of the fires involved the loss of life of 5 individuals. Here's just a quick summary of what they were. These were the 4 fatality fires. The first one, the Erman fire, involved 1 fire fatality. The fire was intentionally set. Smoke alarms were inoperable. The Huffman fire in February, 2 fatalities caused by combustibles too close to a heating appliance, and no smoke alarms were located. The Coventry fire, also in February, 1 fire fatality. This was caused by a buildup of dryer lint, smoke alarm not operable. And then fourthly, the Burgaw fire, 1 fatality. This was in March, cause is undetermined, and the smoke alarm had been removed and or disabled. So just like the discussion about seatbelt usage that we heard earlier this morning, we have been trying for a number of decades to get the word about the importance of smoke alarms, maintaining the operability of your smoke alarms, operability and presence of them. And I think the message has been lacking recently. So what have we done? We have started we've refreshed our campaign, our public education and awareness campaign. The Fire Marshal, Brian Dean here, has given a couple of interviews, and we've stepped up our social media presence on this topic. Brian's been collaborating with the state on a statewide campaign so that the other communities can benefit from our experience. And our own firefighters, of course, when we visit community councils or other venues, are helping us to spread this message. I'm happy to take any questions.
Felix, and then Suzanne.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So a couple questions. First is for the 60 overall fire incidents between January 1 and March 16th, was there a trend for that cause, or like top 5 issues or something like that that you saw repeated multiple times?
Thanks for the question, Mr. Rivera. I'll turn this over to Chief Dean.
Thank you. Yeah, the number one cause, which we routinely see, is cooking. And these fires, 60 fires, that seems like quite a lot, but they happen more frequently than a lot of the community realizes. And we go to a lot of cooking fires, and most of those are contained in the incipient stage, or even they're extinguished before we get there, but we still respond and show up, make sure that everything's okay, and help the folks out, ventilate the structure. But they could extend from that simple melted pan on top of the stove all the way to a complete multifamily structure fire. And like was mentioned, the causes run the gamut. We have improperly discarded cigarettes. Cooking, like I mentioned, is the top cause. Lint buildup in a dryer. Overloaded plugs, multi-plug adapters, power taps. It does run the whole gamut of causes. So we can't really point to one, but we do know that unattended cooking is the number one cause of the fires that we respond to.
Thank you. That's good to know. I guess partly I was curious to see if there was like any insidious reason why that number is so high, but it doesn't sound like it. What is the average for January to March? Are we like way above average, a little bit above average?
I'd say for the number of fires that we're responding to, it's probably fairly average. The number of fatalities, though, is astoundingly high. And we don't, I don't want to call like a quota for a year, but my goodness, we're way too many, and we got to do better.
Got it. Thank you.
Suzanne.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Chief and Fire Marshal Dean, for being here and for sharing the information, though it's grim. My questions were raised and I think addressed mostly by your responses to Mr. Rivera, because I was curious about trend and if the number of fires was typically normal, because many times in this committee we've talked about how primarily the calls are EMS and not fire. But if I understand correctly, the number is pretty much in line with what's typical for winter. Yeah. Okay. So then I'll just follow up then with a practical question. You mentioned dryer lint, and we're not talking about the little filter thing that's typically in front of the door that you empty out probably each time. Can you describe what you're talking about, or how people can address that, if you don't mind, Mr. Chair? Because I've had this conversation with folks too, and a lot of the assumption is it's that filter next to the door of the dryer.
Through the chair, Assemblymember LaFrance. Yeah, we routinely clean out the lint trap on dryers, and that's certainly helpful. But the whole vent system needs to be inspected and cleaned at least annually. There's quite a bit of every single elbow and joint that is utilized in a dryer vent has a potential for capturing lint. And then coupled with our cold climate, cold air comes in through there and the warm air condensates on that surface, and any dry lint just kind of catches on that condensation, excuse me, and then accumulates. If you don't clean it out, one of the things for those of you that do a lot of camping, dryer lint makes a really good fire starter. And it does the same thing inside a dryer vent. And that's really hard because you can't see it until it extends into your walls and, throughout your dryer. And it's a bad situation.
If I may, I would just add that it's important to clean out the screen because that's what keeps most of the lint out of the vent work. But some of it will always escape, and over time it accumulates.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I'm happy. It's also important to note that accordion duct that you can buy at any of your hardware stores is not rated. It's supposed to be smooth wall. That stuff is a horrible lint capture. It gets bent behind there. I know home inspectors are constantly calling that out, and people are like, there's no problem. They pull it apart, and they're like, it looks like it's being lived in by about 1 million hamsters. So this is like, told you. Excellent. All right. If nothing else, we'll move on to Pulse Point update.
All right, thank you. We rolled out Pulse Point on the first Friday in February. We presently have 988 users. That's a smaller number than what we're hoping for, but we're doing some things to try to get the word out about it. One is we have made a couple of presentations to Rotary clubs in town here, shared our story, and actually signed up some people during those presentations. We are in the planning stage right now for doing a community CPR program. I spoke to you about this the last time I presented. That's continuing on. And we have recently just got approval from the facilities folks at Ted Stevens International Airport to begin including Pulse Point messages and marketing materials on the digital displays, like when you're at the carousel for picking up your baggage. You're going to start seeing Pulse Point messages and things along those lines. So we had 164 sudden cardiac arrests in March, and 55 of those were resulted in Pulse Point alerts. In other words, 55 of those arrests were appropriate for notifying the public. I can take any questions.
Mrs. Dern.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chief, I'm just wondering, you talked about this a little bit yesterday, but I'm just wondering, first of all, what's the age? Is it 18 or older, or can children actually sign up for Pulse Point on their devices?
There's no age limitation for Pulse Point.
So is there any opportunity for you to work with ASD to try and get teenagers to sign up on their phones?
We haven't targeted teenagers specifically, but that is certainly something that we would be interested in doing.
I just think with a mental health crisis, there are a lot of reasons someone might call or someone might use it, and it would be interesting if you could utilize it that way. The other thing I'm wondering is, just in our district, in Kevin and my district, have you approached or have been approached by the senior center out at Chudiak and Eagle River? Because if you haven't, I would like to approach them to see if we can. Okay, great. Thanks.
Well, I'm not aware that if we have.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions, Sullivan Arena.
Okay, this is my last topic. I was asked to give a summary of the number of calls that we've been going on to the Sullivan Arena. So this is the data that you see depicted here. Date goes back to October 1st, which is when the Sullivan Arena was opened up for occupancy. 920 calls. Most of those come out of Fire Station 1. And you can see the breakdown there. If you have any questions about that breakdown, I can elaborate. But most of the calls obviously are medical calls by our EMS crews. If we go to the next slide, just a couple of summation points. We have, it's as if each call is 2 calls because we're sending 2 units each time. We've learned that it's not safe to leave our ambulance out on the curb while we go inside to tend to the patient because one time our ambulance was stolen and there was a second time when somebody attempted to steal the ambulance, but our firefighters were able to thwart that theft. So now we're sending 2 companies and we haven't had any recurring instances.
Ms. LaFrance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have to ask about the stolen ambulance. Who steals ambulances? Or, I mean, is it like a joyride thing or because it seems rather noticeable?
Well, when I was a kid, I always thought it would be fun to drive around. Do you have anything to add, Ben?
I don't know what the motivation was.
Yeah, I will reassure you that the narcotic medications in the ambulances are secured in a vault that cannot be accessed by somebody that's not one of us. Since these incidents, we have invested in interlocks that similar to what are in police cars, so we can. I'm not sure exactly what it does, but we can leave the engine running and lock the doors without having to take the keys out of it.
Okay, thanks. And I just have to ask, do people try to steal engines and trucks too? I'm just curious. Sorry, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Also through the chair. I'm aware of it happening in other states and cities around, but I don't know that we've experienced that. I mean, our police department is so top notch that who would steal a fire truck around here?
I've heard they're good at arresting. Thanks.
Typically, it's a policy, that's the response. Keep an engineer outside. Mr. Chair, can we get him? Yes, you want to get him on the record for his response?
Yeah.
I think his response was we try to keep an engineer on site, but yes.
And for the record, that was Ben Lewis. He's acting assistant chief of emergency medical services.
Do I need to repeat that or I'm getting yes.
Go ahead.
So during really the spice epidemic years ago, we modeled a policy that forced the engineer, the driver of the fire engines to stay outside to keep an eye on the apparatus during those responses when the Brother Francis shelter was had really high volume. And so we reinstituted that for the Sullivan Arena. So when an ambulance was going by themselves, we don't send one person in by themselves to these calls. We send 2, so there'd be no one outside with an ambulance. But where a fire engine has 3 people, one person would always stay outside. So that probably was the biggest reason why no one would attempt to steal a fire engine.
Got it. Thank you. And thank you for the information about the Sullivan. I didn't mean to get off track from that, but it's not something that has really come up, I think, much in this committee.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And on more of a somber note, if we don't have any other questions, I was curious, around the Sullivan Arena, do we have what this winter cold weather exposure fatalities surrounding Sullivan Arena where we may be sitting? I don't know if that's something you track or where that's at. That's obviously been a concern with the snow, the extreme weather, and with the Sullivan Arena and looking at other options in our recent conversations regarding a restart for our Homeless and Housing Committee. So thank you.
I've asked Chief Lewis to join us again to address that question.
And so I think it depends on how big a bubble you make around the Sullivan Arena, right? There's a lot of campsites around Mulcahy, and there's been cold weather fatalities in that area, yes. None directly in the Sullivan, of course, because they're in a warm place. I don't have that number offhand. I can probably get that for you.
Yeah, if you could provide that number, and then if we can
Yes.
see if you have a year-over-year trend, so we can kind of watch that, so we can mitigate. And then it would be helpful to know the locations of those, because I think the locations of these might play into location decisions that we make in the future. I think that might be helpful. just identifying those areas of greatest concern and making sure that we have the resources, or what does that look like as far as our outreach?
Okay.
And just having a cognizant plan to make sure that we've identified those areas of individuals that are at greatest exposure, so that as we develop in our homeless response, we have a strategic plan rather than just a random one. So thank you.
So to be clear, you would probably like a citywide map of where our cold exposure.
Yeah, the number, the codes exposure, where those
Okay.
are being discovered. And then I think that'd be really helpful for our
Okay.
homeless and housing committee as they take a look at their efforts. So thank you very much.
Yep, you got it. Thank you.
Ms. LaFrance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If we're on general comments, I just wanted to say congratulations to the chief and to everyone at AFD for the class of 2301, the 23 new members of the fire department. Is that correct? 23?
21.
21. They're wrong. Yeah, if anyone ever has an opportunity to attend, I know Ms. Dern was there along with Ms. Zalatel and Mr. Constant to attend the graduation for AFD or APD. It is one of the most uplifting experiences. So congrats, and just really exciting to see the new members of the department and their enthusiasm to serve and to fulfill this tremendously important role. So thanks so much.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you. All right, moving on to our law department regular update. Go ahead and introduce yourself so we're on record, and thank you.
Thank you to the chair and to the assembly members who are here and to the members of the public. I'm here on behalf of the law department. My name is Ann Helzer. I'm the acting municipal attorney. And to my right is Monica Ellington. She's the acting municipal prosecutor. So the topic today is hiring update. And so Monica can do it for prosecution, but just to give you an update on civil, we have had an interview this past week with an attorney with 30 years of litigation experience. We've made him an offer. We have a potential interview today and possibly tomorrow. So we are making good progress with that. I've been working very closely with HR to try to get these requisitions done. It's not that easy of a process because prior to, I think, the Joe DeRace situation, the Department of Law was hiring directly through the Department of Law, and now it's going through a much more rigorous process through HR. So there has been quite a learning curve, and it's taken some time to rebuild requisitions, figuring out how we're advertising for these jobs and how that's working. In the civil department, we have weekly meetings, and the hiring process is always a topic of conversation. And so I feel very positive that things are moving forward in that way. And with that, I've been working with Monica too. We meet once a week with minor exceptions. And Monica has really taken the reins on hiring and prosecution, and in fact got us an intern that's going to start in June for the civil department. So we've made some very positive strides. And with that, I will, unless there's any questions, I will turn the mic to Monica.
So in prosecution, we've been at a deficit of prosecutors for a while, and I added this to the agenda because I'm happy to report that we have 3 new prosecutors, one of whom specifically cited the 20% raise as a reason to come work for us. So I just wanted to let the assembly know that that has really increased retention, and it has been a huge recruiting tool for us. We are also have some support staff. I would say regular turnover. So we're in the process of that as well. But the attorneys, it's been difficult without being fully staffed on attorneys. And now that we're heading back in the direction of being fully staffed, it's a big relief.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Thank you very much. All right, we'll be moving on to Office of Emergency Management regular updates. Thank you. Have a seat. Introduce yourself.
I do have a couple extra handouts for you, so we will give you at least, I think you already have our presentation, and then I have one more handout for you. Sorry about that. Thank you for having us again. My name's Amanda Loach. I am the director of the Municipality Office of Emergency Management. This is Sean McKenzie. He's one of our 4 program managers in our office. We're glad to be here today with our public safety partners. Since this is only our second time presenting to this committee, and the last time I introduced a high-level overview of our work and priorities over the life cycle of a disaster, I'd like to continue in that vein today, highlighting one of our biggest priorities in the last 4 years, developing and implementing emergency plans for disaster recovery. And then I'll turn it over to Sean McKenzie to talk to you about one of our 2 large pre-disaster plans, the Anchorage Emergency Operations Plan. This informs and reminds our community stakeholders of the process we have to set up to meet various hazards in this community in an emergency or a disaster. Just a quick bit of education before we get started. The difference between an emergency and a disaster is an emergency has enough resources and capabilities to meet the needs of a community. A disaster does not have adequate capability to meet the needs. So on to our disaster recovery. Quickly, I wanted to say thank you and address some recent local press on the success of the Anchorage Disaster Recovery Program, which we all know is much bigger than money. As our community and all the communities around the world continue recovering from disasters we have recently collectively experienced, there's a lot to it. In emergency management, disaster recovery, we work to provide structure and chaos through support for: number 1, infrastructure restoration. Number 2, support for individuals and households. Number 3, prioritization and implementation for mitigation planning and projects. What does this look like? We set up a plan for building collaboration among stakeholders: local, state, non-government entities, federal, and tribal. We set up a planning team and then resources to implement that plan. We answer lots of questions, explaining what we did in the disaster response phase and why we needed to do it. We articulate a prudent decision, a prudent decision-making process given the circumstances of the disaster. Right now, we still have 2 open federally declared disasters: the 2018 earthquake and the COVID-19 pandemic, and 2 open state disasters: the 2021 South Central storm and the 2022 Highland avalanche. We wanted to follow up and let you know that though the EOC has stopped responding, for now anyway, the OEM is still very involved in this important disaster recovery process, and wanted to echo your thanks to the leadership of you all, Alden Thurn from the Finance Department, and that of our own OEM staff, Aaron Zachary and Wendy Reese, who have spent thousands of hours in response and recovery and answered hundreds of questions for information regarding the decisions we made as a community. We look forward to continuing disaster recovery work. And again, thank you for your support throughout the entire process. With that quick recovery message, I'd like to turn the mic over to our newest Office of Emergency Management Program Manager. His first day was March 20th, so please go easy on him. Sean will tell you a bit more about an important preparedness highlight with the update of our comprehensive Anchorage Emergency Operations Plan. Sean is a retired Coast Guard captain in service to our nation for 30 years. We're thrilled to have him join us as a seasoned leader in emergency operations and daily OEM planning coordinator. Go ahead, Sean.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Director Loach, and thank you to the committee for having me today. Like was said, my name is Sean McKenzie, and I'm certainly happy to be here today. What we thought we'd do is start out by talking about the plan, increasing the familiarity of the committee with the emergency operations plan, reviewing the planning process, talk some key updates that happen in this plan, and then talk about implementation. And so just to gain familiarity with the plan, we can go to the next slide. What is an emergency from the Code of Ordinances? And you can see there it's any natural disaster or man-made calamity resulting in death or injury of persons or the destruction of property to such an extent that ordinary, extraordinary measures must be taken to protect public order, safety, and welfare. All right, so this emergency operations plan, it provides a consistent approach for the municipality. It enables all the stakeholders to work together, and it's used to prepare for, respond, and recover from emergencies, regardless of how big or complex they are, with the thought being an efficient and effective response ultimately reduces loss of life, property, and harm to the environment. Okay, you can see our priorities, operational priorities that are detailed in the plan, include protecting human life, property, and the environment, meet the immediate needs of survivors, maintain the continuity and sustainment of essential government operations, maintain and restore critical infrastructure, provide clear and timely emergency public information, restore normal operations and assist with recovery, and preserve local culture and the heritage of diverse populations. So this plan was extremely well vetted, both within the municipality and with our partners outside of the municipality. You can see there are partners such as the Anchorage Fire Department, the Health Department, the Police Department, and many, many others have been involved with us in this update. Outside the municipality, our community partners, including the National Weather Service, American Red Cross, United Way, and many, many others were involved in this process. It's an extremely well-vetted emergency operations plan and supported both within the community and with our partners outside of the municipality. All right, one very important part of the plan is the whole of community approach. And this talks specifically about people with disabilities, access, and functional needs. The graph on the right shows the proper population of the municipality of Anchorage that fall into these categories. And you can see when you total them up, it's 19.9% of the residents have disabilities, access, and functional needs. So it's a significant number. Our plan makes considerations for these, knowing that we could require additional support during emergencies. And guidance is woven through both the BLACE plan and the annexes and appendixes. So on the next slide, you see the standard planning process along the bottom, but it's worth noting that for this process, we shared our existing plans, did a tremendous number of assessments and key documents during the data call with our partners. We held a variety of planning meetings. We gathered a lot of local insight and expertise to assist in developing the emergency operations plan. I received quite a bit of feedback, incorporated that into the drafts, and before getting to the process point we are today. On kind of a higher level, the three different types of plans: strategic, operational, and tactical. Strategic is what you think it would be, broad, long-range goals. An example is our 5-year strategic plan. This emergency operations plan is an operational plan. And so it falls into that middle category where we put the objectives into practice and talk about the steps that we need to take to achieve those strategic goals. And then you can see on the bottom, the tactical. Those are things like standard operating procedures, job aids or whatnot that support the execution of the emergency operations plan. All right, so some highlights from the plan. First of all, it's a living document, and so we're on a schedule to update it biannually. It incorporates institutional knowledge from throughout the emergency management community. You'll see in a second, it details task by functions, and it has appendices for hazards. And then very importantly, it transitions the municipality operating procedure to a system called ICS, which if you're familiar with, that's the National System for Standardization of Responses to Emergencies. It's been adopted throughout the federal government, state government, and local governments across the nation. And so with this update to the EOP, we'll also adopt that construct. It includes FEMA, whole of community lifeline concept, and we'll talk about that in a further slide. And it meets all the federal and state requirements. So I mentioned how the plan was organized. You can see the base plan, which identifies roles and responsibilities and describes emergency operations. The functional annex, I'll give you a list of those on the next slide. There's 9 of them that talks about who exactly does what before, during, and after an incident. There are 12 hazards we have identified in our hazard profile that talks about how to focus on preventative, protective, and recovery actions for these 12 specific hazards. And then finally, additional elements are things like a glossary, acronyms, and those FEMA emergency lifelines that I talked about previously. So what are the functional annexes? You can see them there, things like damage assessment, debris management, interoperable communications. The plan has the lead coordinating agency, and then also the different partners and other parts of the municipality that help out in each of these different functional tasks. The appendix has 12 hazards. You can see the hazards listed there: avalanche, civil unrest, dam failures, etc. Who the lead lead coordinating agency is, and then what the responsibilities are for other folks in the municipality and the community. So on the next slide, the picture on the right is our actual emergency operations center. It's a physical place. It can also be virtual. But the key is that it's an area where you can collect, analyze, and share information. You can support resource requests. You can coordinate plans and determine future requirements, liaise with the partners, support public communication, and support the policy and legal needs of decision makers. So in our case, having those different agency representatives all together in one place during an emergency is absolutely critical. So I mentioned that we're transitioning to ICS, Incident Command Support. This is a organizational chart illustrating a standard ICS model. In a disaster, it might not be fully fleshed out like this. Depending on the size of the disaster, it could be smaller with these positions not necessarily all filled. But in a big response, this is what the organizational structure would look like. So it is scalable. Our Emergency Operations Center can be activated by the mayor, the municipal manager, or the OEM director. And the key is when the incident command post capacity on scene is exceeded for incident management. So for your information, there's 5 response levels: normal, response incident monitoring, partial activation, full activation, and recovery options. And those are detailed in the plan. And in this Emergency Operations Center, we coordinate with Incident Command Posts, Department Operations Center, tribes, state, federal, community, and private sector partners. And like I said, there was plenty of standard operating procedures and job aids, tactical things that help you get the job done during an emergency. So I mentioned the FEMA lifelines. You can see them listed at the bottom there. There's 7 of them. And the point of the lifelines from FEMA is to describe major categories of life and how they're impacted by a disaster. For example, safety and security, food, water, shelter, health and medical, etc. So these reports have been identified to a key agency for each different area, and they'll describe what the disaster situation is for that particular aspect of community life. And these reports will be very interesting for policy group and other leadership members to see where we're at in what stage of the disaster recovery. And then finally, there's a mechanism for after action reports and improvements. Things like what was supposed to happen, what actually happened, what we can learn from this, and how we can improve. So there's a method there to capture that institutional knowledge and feedback and roll it into future updates of the plan. And so with that, I'm very happy to be here today. Our next steps are to socialize the plan like we're doing with yourself. Look at the plan and see what additional annexes, standard operating procedures, or job aids may need to be developed. And then finally, test, train, and exercise with our emergency management partners. So that concludes the formal portion of the presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks to both of you for this. This is very instructive, and thank you to your work, and congratulations on the job. We're lucky to have you. I have 2 questions. The first one has to do with the lead coordinating agency departments. I see that in several of these hazards, you would have like joint or team lead. And if you could just speak a little bit about how that works and how you plan for that, multiple decision makers.
Yeah, so depending on the nature of the emergency, it's not exactly clear that one agency is in charge. And so, and oftentimes there might be more than one agency in charge based on their jurisdiction and their areas of responsibility. So there's a concept called unified command, and the process helps to bring those people together and talk about what are the shared goals and objectives, and then formulate a plan over an operational period, maybe 24 hours or 12 hours or 48 hours to go after meeting those goals together. And so when it's a time when both agencies are in charge or both agencies have responsibility or jurisdiction, they have to work together in a unified command, and that's part of the ICS construct.
Thank you. And then the second question is kind of similar, but you outline when the OEM director on the Emergency Operations Center key info, you outline when the OEM director would be able to jump in. But is the municipal manager basically only going to be the lead in terms of determining what happens when the mayor delegates that authority? Or if there were, I'm just trying to understand because it's not delineated. So I just want to.
Thanks. So through the chair, it is ultimately, we're an executive body, all emergency managers are. And so ultimately in code, it is the responsibility of the mayor to determine how we respond to an emergency. And so all of that is articulated in the plan as well as the assembly responsibilities. But yes, I have seen the mayor delegate responsibilities to the municipal manager, and then vice versa. I've seen the municipal manager delegate responsibilities according to circumstances within the emergency as well. Does that answer your question?
Yes, very much. Thank
Okay.
you.
Mr. Rivera.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a really great presentation. You know, one of the things that I always think about whenever I see these types of presentations about, you know, how do we deal with emergencies and how do we communicate to the public is language access. So can you please speak to how your plan intersects with language access?
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about that in our how we're addressing the whole community. We actually have a within this plan, it's not addressed in an individual place. What we say is it's baked in the cake, right? It's everywhere in the plan. So that was a particular specific that was brought forward as something that needed to occur in this plan update. And so my hope is that you can't find the places where we have made sure to integrate any of the access issues that we had with the old plan. That said, we do have a project that is set up right now that you will see on our website visually. You'll see that it is being, that language access is being addressed. More pictures available, different language translations, etc. It's being addressed.
Great, thank you. Glad to hear it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Excellent. See, none. I'm curious because one, as you're putting together the systems, when it looks like you're trying to get everybody on the boat and rowing in the right direction first, so that we can, you know. But I'm curious on your analysis where you see our biggest holes are. Like, what do you anticipate are going to be the largest things that we're going to have to overcome? Given, you know, I'm visiting other places. I see Anchorage or Alaska specifically have lots of areas that are single points of access that service large areas of the community. But I'm kind of curious on what you think our biggest exposure is on this, and where do you think are the biggest hurdles that we're going to be challenged to resolve?
Sure. So my concern coming up is training and exercising. So what I've said to the staff that have been nervous about the lack of training and exercising over the last few years is, guess what? We've been training and exercising in real life. We've been having on-the-job training as part of our response. So I'm concerned that we don't have enough resources right now to adequately train and exercise. I prefer to train and exercise in a safe environment outside of a response. And so that's my concern, is that we don't have enough resources set aside for that.
Mr. Peterson.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. So are you saying you're short personnel, you're short funding, or both? Where are the shortages?
Yeah, I would say both. So prior to the 2018 earthquake, it's my understanding that we didn't have a lot of emergencies and disasters in this jurisdiction. And so as attention or public interest, et cetera, falls away from emergencies and disasters, sometimes resources fall away. So the Office of Emergency Management and the resources devoted to that have shrunk considerably since September 11th. And they're beginning to increase now that we have disasters. So I do see us swelling in ranks and hopefully in resources in coming up. And we'd appreciate your support with that.
Thank you. And just perhaps it looks like our Anchorage Fire Department and Police Department are the front lines regarding our CEOP components. And I don't know what that looks like for training, exercises, or how we utilize that. But I will tell you one of the, and Dan can probably speak to this, probably the most grueling day of my life in the last many years was the single day of training I spent at the AFD over there. Oh yeah, yes. That was an eye-opening experience. So anybody who thinks firefighters make too much money, go do that one day of training. See how you hold up there. But just looking at some of those resources that we can work with, and also just realizing the role the important role that they're placing and they serve our community with. So, any other questions? Thank you so much. I appreciate it greatly. Let's find our agenda. Unfinished business. We don't have anything on their unfinished business unless any members here have something that got overlooked. Moving on to new business, facial recognition. Joey, I believe that was yours. Do we have any updates under facial recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Not a lot. I was sent by Ann Helzer an alternative proposal compared to my own. I don't believe that was distributed to every member, though. Is that correct?
Well, that's correct.
I don't know if the intention is to move forward with this or what the situation is with this one, but in terms of the ordinance as prepared by myself and Assembly Council, that's set for public testimony and whatnot at the meeting of the 11th. I recognize it'll be the last meeting for a good chunk of the Assembly. I suppose we can talk briefly about the version that was sent to myself and I guess just my co-sponsors. Yeah, I'll go ahead and invite up Chief Curl. I see you're still here if you wanted to talk about it.
So what I prepared, Mr. Mullen asked me to prepare a supplement. What I did was I prepared based on other jurisdictions, a law that did not ban facial recognition, but put conditions on the use of it. And it was based on a lot of research done by the International Association of Chiefs of Police and some other organizations. I don't have it in front of me. I was prepared to come up here and talk about it. Sure. So we went over a lot of similar definitions, but I think the biggest, instead of banning it completely, it actually dictates when any department in the city could use facial recognition. And it lists when we could do it as the Anchorage Police Department. It requires an update from the police department when we purchase facial recognition, which company we go with. I think some of the big things. So here's when we wouldn't use it. We wouldn't use it for tracking the movements of an identified individual in a public space in real time. We wouldn't create databases of images using live video feed for the purpose of using a repository of facial recognition technology. Service provider except pursuant to an authorized use. No comparison image may be retained or used further by the service provider except as required for auditing that use and as may be otherwise required by law. Let me see when. Some of the things that we would, any municipal department or staff that uses facial recognition would maintain records sufficient to facilitate discovery in criminal proceedings, post-conviction proceedings, public reporting, and auditing of compliance with such agencies' facial recognition technology policies. Such agencies shall collect data pertaining to the complete history of the user's queries, the total number of queries, the number of queries that resulted in a list of possible candidates, how many times an examiner offered law enforcement an investigative lead based on the findings, how many cases were closed due to an investigative lead from facial recognition, what types of criminal offenses are being investigated, the nature of the image repository being compared or queried, demographics information for the individuals whose images are queried, and if applicable, any other entities with which the department shared facial recognition data. It also required an annual report, just like we do with the drone report. I think the biggest key here, so going back and do some more research, the National Institute of Standards and Technology is, they evaluate facial recognition software and they come up with the algorithms and they do a comparison. And one of the requirements of any facial recognition that the police department would be required to meet would the National Institute of Standards and Technology, the NIST, the vendor would have to meet a 98% accuracy algorithm across all demographics. So, I mean, that's a big key. I know there's a concern that it might be the algorithm might be tainted toward some of the minority groups, but this would require at least a 98% true positive within one or more data sets relevant to the application in the NIST face recognition. And that has to deal with race, skin tone, ethnicity, or gender. The other thing that would be in the law would be that be an annual update. So NIST would have to come in and actually, whatever vendor we chose would have to reevaluate, make sure that we still maintain that 98% accuracy for the algorithms. There's a lot in here. It took me a week to come up with this, so I could go over everything. I think this is a good, I'm not going to say compromise. This is a good ordinance to have for any department here in the city that is looking to use facial recognition. It requires a percentage, a 98% algorithm, requires annual reporting. It requires training for any of the vendors. It requires the police department to report to the assembly when we choose a vendor. Requires us to have a policy in place before we ever use it, which is obvious. We would do that anyway. But it's to me, it's a good ordinance, and it would apply very well. My whatever policy I created would be based off this law, this ordinance.
Thank you, Mr. Volin.
Thank you. Off the top of my head, I don't have it in front of me either, but I think subsection B talked about it not being used to get an arrest warrant.
Yes. So that's the one of the things is facial recognition could never be used for probable cause. So it would never, you couldn't use that to get a warrant. So you couldn't establish probable cause for an arrest based on facial recognition. And to me, that's just, I talked about this before for those that were here from when we had the meeting. shoddy police work that was done in some of these other places where they would use facial recognition and say, oh, let's just go with that. It's just, this is a tool that we would use it for. That would identify a person of interest, and then we would do the legwork to make sure that that person of interest is actually could be the the person that we were looking for. And we would continue with the rest to establish probable cause for an arrest. One thing that during my studies that I failed to mention the last time, one of the biggest complaints amongst a lot of the it's Project Innocence, I think, is one of the groups out there that says that misidentification of suspects occurs in between 70 and 80% of the time. And facial recognition that's one of the tools that the Project Innocence, and again, I don't know, I'm trying to recall off the top of my head, Project Innocence actually recognizes the value of facial recognition because it doesn't rely on a witness identifying the suspect. It can actually use other methods, and it actually is a tool to make sure that the innocent don't get arrested based on false witness testimonies.
Please, go ahead.
Thank you. And thank you for submitting that. So the co-sponsors have seen it. I guess a question for Ms. Helzer then, can this be shared with the entire body? Are we at that point? Because anyone who wants to can bring an amendment forward. And then also, it sounds like Joey sent you a proposal. So I guess what's the timeline? Because we're coming on the 11th pretty quickly for us to see that. Did you want to give us a little synopsis, if that's okay with the chair? Because I don't think I've even seen that yet. So just want to make sure that people see the different ideas before it's go time.
Sure, we have time. I can work with council to figure out amendments and things like that. Mine is 8 pages. I don't believe there's a specific element that bans, which I agree with, its use in real time. And my thinking is we could prepare an amendment that specifically exempts real-time use from the list of exemptions. I think, chalk it up to, I guess, being new, I should have been clearer that what I'm proposing is less of a ban and more of a regulation itself. For those who read to the end of the ordinance, you'll see a massive list of exceptions, including a carte blanche. You have to come to the assembly, explain your policies and procedures, explain how you would like to use facial recognition, and then the assembly can approve or deny that use, which I will point out is pretty much literally what we're doing right now. I have some other questions, but does that kind of address? There are elements that I can take from this and turn into amendments, certainly.
Thank you.
Mr. Sweet?
Thank you. Couple of questions. First is, why wasn't this shared with the entire body? Is there a particular reason?
Actually, just a quick point of order, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Rivera?
Thanks. If we're going to be meeting beyond 12:30, we need to extend by a little bit.
Yeah, we got 3 minutes. So,
Yeah. Motion to extend by 10 minutes.
I'll second that.
All right. Second. Any opposed? Unanimous consent. Passed. We will go till 12:40. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, for whatever reason why it wasn't sent, I think it would be wise to send to everyone. Furthermore, 2 specific questions about the language of this. First, from that work session, you repeatedly referenced a vendor, didn't say the name, but referenced somewhere in Miami. They had a 99% accuracy rating when it was demonstrated to you, is my understanding of the situation. Why the difference between, name dropping this 99% accurate system, but then bring forward a proposal that specifically enumerates that your standard would be 98%?
It just opens up for different vendors. Like I said, NIST is the NIST is they evaluate all the vendors out there, and 98% just seemed to be. I looked at a few other laws out there across the country. 98% were some of them settled on. So I said, yeah, that's 98% A lot of other stuff is plus or minus 3%. So 98% seemed like a good settling point.
All right. The section regarding facial recognition technology includes subsection 3. You specifically say minimal performance variations across demographics associated with race, skin tone, ethnicity, or gender. What is the definition of minimal performance variations? Is that where that 98% comes from?
Yeah, that's what that's from. That's just kind of a definition of where they got it from.
All right, that's all I got.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions. Oh, yes, Ms. Hauser.
I just wanted to answer Mr. Sweet's question, why it wasn't distributed to everyone. I had hoped to speak with Assembly Council and Mr. Sweet and potentially Chief Curl, but I had his proposal, and the intention was that we would get together and sort of see where things could be met in terms of resolution. And obviously that should happen sooner than later. But we are meeting today on something else, but we can probably throw this into. So thank you.
Thank you. All right. Just out of the interest of time, we got 10 minutes, and I do know that we have someone on the phone who wants to participate for public participation. So if we can do our wildfire prevention update, getting that time of year.
Thank you. Just very quickly, Chief Schrage for the record, and I'm joined by Chief Brian Dean. You want to run through the list?
Certainly. Thank you. Yeah, so there's seems like quite a few things on the wildfire front this year for the AFD. I want to first and foremost talk about the Parks and Rec efforts. They've probably done most of the actual work on the ground so far over the last couple of years, and they're continuing even right now. They're doing wildfire mitigation for hazard trees and spruce bark beetles in parklands, and at this point they're working on areas that they can't get to in the summertime because of wet ground. So they're frozen now, so they're able to do some mitigation in the off season. Our AFD crews have currently finished their wildland refresher courses. That's the online portions to keep up their certification for wildland firefighting. We have met with the Division of State of Alaska Division, Natural Resources Division of Forestry on the wildfire response coordination. And that's just so that our crews know when to contact Division of Forestry and then what that looks like when they show up on scene, what their needs are, and how we can coordinate our efforts on an actual event. Our crews right now are working on the practical training that we're going through. Evolution's actually physical on the ground, pulling hose, and then doing tabletop exercises so the crews can each rotate through those and experience what their actual operational needs are for a possible event. We met, Chief Schrage and I met with the U.S. Forest Service to coordinate the congressional funds that have been authorized for Anchorage for wildfire mitigation. There is going to be a application process for that we're working through. We met recently with the Rabbit Creek Community Council Resilience Subcommittee and HALO on wildfire coordination, including our participation in the May 6th Community Wildfire Awareness Event. That's going to be at the Hilltop Ski Area, and there's a AFD Division of Forestry is going to be there. OEM, the community councils, the utilities, all in concert with making wildfire awareness, having Firewise properties, and providing public information on wildfire mitigation. We recently finished up participation with UAA ICER regarding wildfire evacuation studies. There's going to be an ISA report coming out soon that will hopefully give us some good momentum on evacuation planning. We're in the process of developing the authorized PIO position for AFD. That's going to help us a lot in the wildfire arena, getting information out to the public and then coordinating with our wildfire efforts. Along with that, we're also developing a AFD Wildland Urban Interface Coordinator position to kind of carry forward our wildfire mitigation office. And in anticipation of a lot of these projects that are going forward, we just need we got to have staff to be able to bird dog them and make sure that we're getting additional projects in the pipeline, that we have the resources to complete the projects and see them through. And then finally, we're continuing to pursue additional wildfire and hazard mitigation grant funds. There's some FEMA funds that are out there that we're following up on, as well as things from the State of Alaska Division of Natural Resources and Division of Forestry. So there's quite a bit hanging over our heads right now that we're trying to corral and make sure that we can make happen throughout this coming year.
I'd like to conclude, if I may, just by the PIO position description has been submitted, and it's working through the machinery for eventually we'll be able to hire into that position. The wildfire coordinator position, same thing. We've submitted the position description for that. And then lastly, I'd like to just let you know about a wildfire map product that we currently has landed on our AFD municipal webpage, muni.org/fire. Click on the fire map. This is a way to inform residents of the status of a fire in their vicinity. For example, a resident in Eagle River Valley or on the Anchorage Hillside could get a pulse point alert announcing that there's a wildfire in their vicinity. They can go to the wildfire map and see the growth, its movement. It even depicts the real-time location of aerial firefighting assets. And I'd encourage you to check that out. And if there are any questions, we'll take those now in the small amount of time we have left.
Ms. LaFrance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you both very much for your efforts in this area. Especially important, as you know, to District 6, Hillside and Turnagain Arm. I'm just really grateful for all your work and support of those resiliency efforts. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, we're going to move on to audience participation. I believe that we have somebody on the phone. If you go ahead and state your name, the area in which you live, and then you'll have 3 minutes.
Sure. My name's Nick Ferranti. I'm a resident. I'm also a concerned citizen and attorney. I live right near Valley of the Moon. I won't take all 3 minutes. I'll spend about 90 seconds.
Thanks, Nick. You're just you're a little quiet on your side, so if you just make sure that you pronounce and just speak clearly into the microphone or into your phone, so we can all hear you very well. Thank you, Nick.
Is this a little better?
Tremendously. Thank you.
Hello. Great. So just about 90 seconds. So in 2020, there was this guy named Robert Williams. He's a black guy, and he was arrested for stealing from a store in Detroit. And police took him away in a squad car in front of his daughters, and he was imprisoned. And what turned out was that Mr. Williams hadn't been to this store in years, and he didn't commit the crime. And so you might be wondering, how on earth does that possibly happen? Well, to assist in the arrest of Mr. Williams, the police used a facial recognition program that was 100 times men. Mr. Williams is just one person out of a growing list of people who have been falsely accused. This technology is also used to track peaceful protesters, investigate minor offenses, or arrest people with no independent evidence of guilt. It's racist, it's invasive, and it's counterproductive. And just one more thing, the idea that APD is even thinking about this while continuing to drag its feet for body cameras is just tone deaf. It's absolutely tone deaf. The lack of transparency from the department about body cameras, including the arbitration, a nonsense arbitration that probably doesn't need to be happening in the first place, it's a failure of good government. And with great respect, it's a really bad look for both the municipality and the police department. Anyways, thank you for your time today. I really appreciate you listening.
Thank you. Do we have anybody else in person? We have 1 minute. Yes, sir. You can be real quick and then we'll adjourn right after. Thank you.
I just wanted to speak quickly on the matter of the media. For the policing blitz, one of the things that was brought up was the shoplifting and the engagement there. I just want to remind us all that shoplifting comes from a place. It was very notable that the two places that were referenced and targeted were Fred Meyer's and REI, a place that sells groceries and food, and a place that sells outdoor gear. So when we're talking about those things, it's good that we're enforcing our laws. It's good that we're apprehending criminality, but we also need to consider the source, why we have those problems in the first place. And if we can address root causes, we may not actually end up having the kind of criminality that then needs to be enforced at later times.
Thank you. And what was your name?
Oh, my name is Skylar Kingstrang. Yes.
Thank you, Skylar.
And Mr. Chair, if I may,
Mr. Rivera.
I know that there's one more person on the phone who wants to testify. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Rivera. Do we have one more person on the phone? We're at the end of our time, but we can sneak you in.
Can you hear me?
Yes, barely. Just make sure you speak loud. Please put your name, the district in which you live, and then if you would just speak loudly and clearly into your phone, you may proceed. Thank you.
Great. So good afternoon. My name is Celeste Hodge Grouden. I live in Potter Marsh. I'm the president and CEO of the Alaska Black Caucus. We are a nonprofit organization that champions the lives of Black people and other communities of color in the areas of health, economics, justice, and education. I'm actually traveling, and so that's probably why you're not able to hear me, but this issue is too important for me to pass up. When we talk about body cams, we've been talking about these body cameras for close to 2 years. And this is past the point of frustration. It's ridiculous. It just seems that at every meeting, there's a whole new situation that prolongs officers from being outfitted with body cams. Why in the world can't the public know who the arbitrator is and when this arbitration is going to take place? How is that going to harm the process? As far as facial recognition, why in the world, again, would we be trying to pursue something that discriminates and is racially biased? Why not take all of that energy and focus it on securing the dang on body cameras that we voted for over 2 years ago and is paid for? So thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you very much. Mr. Salt, you had a closing statement. I apologize. I missed your text.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Real quick to both of our callers, I want to make it clear, and Chief Curl can confirm, APD is not looking at facial recognition software. There are no plans to look at it. It is simply that Member Sweet is bringing forward legislation to mitigate some of the items that you're talking about. So again, APD is not looking at facial recognition software. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions and concerns? Excellent. Appreciate you guys coming today. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Thank you, Mr. Bitter. We are adjourned. Thank you.